My deep gratitude to you, Ramachandra, for inviting me to speak with you and the glorious devotees there in New Jersey. And I get to talk about Srila Prabhupada, my favorite subject. I probably don't know any of you guys personally, but I'm constantly amazed and filled with pleasure to hear about how you and the new and younger generations of Vaishnavas are spreading Krishna consciousness all up and down the East Coast there. Please accept my humble gratitude for this. But most of all, my deepest gratitude is to Lord Krishna for giving me this long, I'm 78 years now, this long life to recount and broadcast the inconceivable glories of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who appeared in the Western world 55 years ago to plant the ancient seed of Krishna consciousness in an America gone mad. I understand that most of you guys out there today are of Indian descent and one or two generations probably into this country, recent arrivals in some way. You may not know what America was like in those days, in the 1960s. This was before the massive wave of Indian immigration, which has so enriched our country today. In fact, Bhaktivedanta Swami was the first Indian person I ever saw in my life at 25 years old. In fact, I like to think that in some ways, Srila Prabhupada was responsible for opening the door to America for India. Bhaktivedanta Swami came to us in San Francisco in 1967 in what they call the Summer of Love. It was at the perfect historical moment in time. He was bearing his ancient wisdom in our own language, and he stepped through this little window. This is the generation of young Westerners you saw through that little window in 1967, the perfect historical window. World War II had just been fought, the most savage exhibition of violence in history. Well, maybe since the Battle of Kurukshetra, I don't know. But the most savage exhibition of brutality and violence had just been waged and won. We won. So our post-war generation of children in America, this war machine suddenly moved over from producing weapons to consumer goods. So our parents were suddenly filled with opulence. They had, there was a historical wave of prosperity such as the world had never seen. Our parents had cars and appliances, and as children, we were heirs to this great good prosperity, material abundance. And for the first time in history, people started having spare time, leisure time. Another new thing that came up in those days, in my generation, education. For the first time in history, millions of young children were given college educations. The door was open to knowledge. Communications. Suddenly, we could see on television what people were doing clear across the country on the other coast. They were listening to the same music we were. They were involved in the same activities we were. There was a communication spread that was brand new connection. It was an age of extreme excitement. But also in the background was this dull conformity of our parents. The war, the segregation, the corrupt leaders, and the political divisions. So millions of us young people, millions, wanted something more. A whole generation wanted something more. So we began searching. For the first time, we had access to books of knowledge everywhere. Why? There were bookstores. You could pick up books anywhere. This is all a new phenomenon. We created our own music that we liked. We experimented. We looked for answers. There was this neighborhood in San Francisco called the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood. I think it's something like 14 square blocks, a small area. And suddenly in the summer of 1967, it was a neighborhood meant to house 10,000 people. 100,000 young people came there just to be with each other and search for answers to this great mystery of life. So into this perfect situation stepped the Swami. He was already 70 years old. He was born in a previous century. With his glowing face and his perfect answers to every question, he joined us. He sat down with us. He lived with us. He was the only spiritual leader to have done this, to come and sit and live with the hippies in the Haight-Ashbury. He was a person, a real person, displaying the physical and mental attributes of perfection. Did you ever meet a perfect person? We certainly hadn't. But the Swami was a living person without any error, totally pure. And his physical beauty and the grace was constant, yet changing and ever attractive. He's someone who knows everything. He's a living embodiment of all knowledge. Bhaktivedanta Swami glowed. He wove his spell over us. He attracted us like iron filings to a magnet. You couldn't keep your eyes off of his physical beauty. And he knew you. He knew every thought in your head. It was totally clear between you. And he was there to be your friend and your guide forever. Most of you know the story already. How it happened, how the Swami captured a few of us, and how in such short time the Hare Krishna culture exploded around the world. I'll just read one little passage. And did we have fun? The Swami's mood is hilarious. As serious and grave as the absolute truth can be, it's also the reservoir of delight and pleasure. And the Swami tickles our funny bones. And he's the living example how much fun is the life on board his magic sailing ship, chasing rhinos with the Swami. And this was the Swami's famous marching orders for our little army. I'll just read you his statement. We should always be enthusiastic to try for capturing the rhinoceros. That way, if we fail, everyone will say, never mind, nobody can catch a rhinoceros anyway. And if we succeed, then everyone will say, just see what a wonderful thing they have done. So this was our theme. And as some of you may know, over the past 8 years now, I've been writing and producing a 3-volume memoir of the 7 years that I passed at Srila Prabhupada's feet and by his side. At first as his trusted lieutenant, and then for years as his personal secretary. I call it Chasing Rhinos with the Swami for the reasons that I just read to you. This theme of chasing rhinos is central to understanding action, the heart and soul of devotional life. Bhaktivedanta Swami told us about this book, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He told us that Bhagavad Gita is the summary and the compendium of all knowledge, all knowledge. And at the onset of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks Krishna, what do I do? How do I act? And Krishna replies, just act for me. Strive for me with your fullest energy. Take the biggest risks for me. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. I will protect you. In other words, as the Swami put it, chase the rhino. Dare to pursue the biggest goals for Krishna. And this was the spirit and the subject and the object of all of our activities in those days. Chasing the rhinos became the hue and the cry of the first generation of the Swami's star-struck disciples. Risk everything, Prabhupada said. Krishna must personally intervene to help you. You get to see Krishna faster by taking bigger risks. He said two things. You become yourself Krishna conscious and you spread Krishna consciousness. That's it. Two things. Moreover, you become Krishna conscious by spreading Krishna consciousness. This is the secret. Two for the price of one. Chase the rhino for Krishna, become Krishna conscious. Simple. He called it devotional service. In those days, we had no models. There was no history. There were no maps, no books of instruction, no well-marked trails. We had only the Swami, his words and his personal example. How he had chased the rhino to America as an old man himself, with no money or friends or no plan really, under Krishna's protection. We saw his photos of him standing with Indian heads of state, and we saw copies of his letters to presidents and popes. He never minced words. Each day he said to us, what I am telling you will save humankind. You must help me change the world. So you might have seen Volume 1 of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. I don't know. Have any of you read this book yet? I don't know if you're hearing me or seeing.
I have read it. It was very beautiful. It reminded me of my parents.
Okay. Anyway, I'll just read a passage from Volume 1. I like this passage. It may be illuminating. Swamiji had explained in a lecture that Krishna most appreciates devotees who risk the most on his behalf. And if you risk everything for Krishna, he must personally intervene to remove obstacles to your risky service. Most of us in Haight-Ashbury in 1967 were there at great risk, giving up the comforts of homes, educations, careers, and society to become outcasts searching for meaning. Many of us had already at a young age traveled widely, taken great risks, and carved out an independent lifestyle. So we immediately connected with the Swami's courage. We loved his message that to get Krishna, you must take risk. You can say that we were on a great adventure with the Swami. It was the most exhilarating adventure of our lives. So become Krishna conscious and spread Krishna consciousness. Well, what did I know how to do at 25 years old? Nothing much. I had some friends in the rock and roll business, and I thought, well, okay, well, if we needed money, and I thought, well, let's put on a benefit musical concert and raise some money, invite all of our friends and neighbors there in Haight-Ashbury and raise the money for the Swami. He's coming in a few days, and we don't have any money. So we called this the Mantra Rock Festival. It was in a big dance hall in San Francisco. And I was really worried because I thought if this Swami saw this room full of 1,000 crazy hippies, that he wouldn't like it. He wouldn't like this service. I was really worried. We had 3 of the greatest rock and roll bands of the time on stage, and everyone was in a smoking. Those people were all smoking pot and carrying on, 1,000 of them. And the Swami walked through that crowd of insane people up on the stage, and he started dancing. He loved it. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, this guy is okay. Spreading Krishna consciousness is going to be fun. So that idea grew. How can we please the Swami the most? There was kind of a transcendental competition between the young devotees. There were only 30 Krishna devotees in the world at that time, or disciples, I should say. But how do we stand out? How do I make more noise than the next guy in order to get the Swami's attention? So he had been telling us that he really would like to have a temple in London. At that time in the 1960s, there was a group of singers and musicians in London called the Beatles. They were the most famous people in the world. There's no historical comparison to the fame of these 4 young men. Everything they did and said, every second of their lives was transmitted around the world, and everyone was interested. The Beatles were the world's most famous people by far. So Mukunda, my best friend Mukunda, and my dear wife Malati and I, and Mukunda's wife Janaki, who is the sister of my dearest girlfriend, Jamuna. We grew up together. So Malati and I, Mukunda, Janaki, and Jamuna and her husband Gurdas, we asked the Swami if we could go to London and start a temple there. He immediately said yes. And we told him that our immediate aim was to meet these Beatles. And certainly they will help us spread Krishna consciousness to the rest of the world. So in early September of 1968, the 6 of us and my 3-month-old daughter, Saraswati, flew from California to London on one-way tickets with no money, no friends there, no plan really, relying solely on Krishna, just like Prabhupada did, and the blessings of Srila Prabhupada to start the Hare Krishna movement in the UK. We arrived in London in September 1968, and you won't believe this, but by Christmas, less than 3 months later, we were chanting with the Beatles in their homes. Now, in 1968, the 4 most famous men in the world, who can influence them? Only the most powerful message on the planet would do it. Bhaktivedanta Swami's message, which easily explained who I am, where I came from, where I'm going, what is this creation, what is my place in it, who is God, what is his name, what does he look like, how does he act, and how I should act, everything. Simple message. And you can look back now and see how powerful is Krishna's message, how it could influence these most powerful people in the world. So thanks to George Harrison, the Hare Krishna mantra soon spread all over the world very quickly. And Volume 1 describes these early days, 1967, 1970, in San Francisco and London. That's Volume 1. Now you can say, oh, this is dry history. How is this old stuff relevant to my life now in this high-speed connected world of today? Well, the essence, the spirit of our lives in Krishna consciousness is Srila Prabhupada. And to understand him from these books, from the personal first-hand accounts, is vital to your understanding of the possibilities and the future dimensions of Krishna consciousness in the world. How you can harness Srila Prabhupada's energy, internalize it now, and spread his message throughout the world for future generations of humans stuck on this crazy planet. Now, volume 2. Okay, we've been in UK now for 2 years. And as Ramachandra mentioned before, in early September of 1970, Srila Prabhupada sent letters to 20 of his Western devotees, inviting us to join him in India to launch the Krishna movement in his own country, where Krishna consciousness had dwindled over time, and as he put it, was nearly extinct in the land of Krishna's origin. And my name, my wife's name, and my daughter's names were on the list. So we arrived in Bombay in early October 1970. And it's hard for you to imagine what it was like in India in those days. As soon as we got to Bombay, as soon as we came into India, we started looking for Krishna. We thought, oh, Krishna's going to be everywhere around here. There's going to be Krishna temples, there's going to be Krishna devotees everywhere. We couldn't find Krishna. There were no pictures of Krishna anywhere. There were no temples to Krishna anywhere in the biggest city in India. Where's Krishna? It may be hard for you to understand that Srila Prabhupada reintroduced Krishna in its powerful form that you see there today from nothing. There were 20 of us, young, kind of powerless Western devotees, and Srila Prabhupada. And within a few days, he started astounding the nation of India. It was headlines in every newspaper all across India, day and night. The Hare Krishna devotees, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Krishna consciousness. Yes, as Ramachandra called us earlier, Prabhupada named us his dancing white elephants. Our job was simply to sing and dance, and he would say the rest. He would do the rest. We didn't know how to do anything in India. I'll read a little passage from the book. We were mesmerized. This is just a description as we're sitting in a room in Bombay with Srila Prabhupada. We were mesmerized as Prabhupada spoke on those golden mornings over the raucous cawing of crows outside, cooing of pigeons in the courtyard. Changing expressions moved across his golden face, like the play of cumulus and sunlight over a varied landscape. One moment he was from our world, and the next from a world we couldn't penetrate, the self-contained knower of everything. Then suddenly he's tossing a ball to you in a friendly game of verbal catch, maybe a fastball to see if you can catch it. He might break from describing Krishna's vast cosmic design to a real concern for your upset stomach. Just try a little bicarbonate of soda, 1 spoonful of water. None of us had ever seen such depth of personality. In a short time, Srila Prabhupada put Krishna on the map in India. And these stories in volume 2 will amaze you. Just a few examples. In the 1971 Kumba Mela, January, February 71. Kumba Mela is an event that happens every 12 years or so in Allahabad, where millions, 10, 20 million pilgrims come there for spiritual purposes. So we got a little tent and pandal and set up there, and Srila Prabhupada's group, our camp, became the most famous place in that whole 20 million people. We were surrounded day and night with people taking note of this Krishna consciousness. What a pure movement it was, how great it was for their country. Ramachandra mentioned Cross Maidan, where his spiritual master Lokanath first saw us. That was an event that happened over a 10-day period in Cross Maidan in the very center of Bombay. And over that 10-day period where Prabhupada spoke morning and night, over 1 million people came to see this Krishna consciousness sensation. Prabhupada took us on our first trip to Vrindavan, introduced us, Krishna devotees, his Krishna devotees, to Vrindavan. He showed us Krishna's place. There was a lot of resistance in Vrindavan. A real fight went on there. But by his will and diplomacy, Srila Prabhupada planted the ISKCON flag in the Holy Dham. All these stories, you'll read all these stories in volume 2. Especially how Srila Prabhupada acquired and set into motion our 3 major temples in India, Juhu, Mayapur, and Vrindavan. He laid the cornerstones on these 3 massive projects, properties, within a 3-week period, all 3 of them. How did he do it? You'll be amazed to read it. I mean, he laid the cornerstone in Mayapur at the very end of February 1972. On the 13th of March, he laid the cornerstone in Vrindavan at the Krishna Balaram temple. And on the 23rd of March, he laid the cornerstone at Juhu. 3 weeks. In June 1971, Srila Prabhupada appointed me as his personal secretary. It was a new post, really. I mean, when I joined Srila Prabhupada, there were 30 people in the world. He had 30 disciples. There were 2 little temples. That was it. By 1971, not even 4 years later, there were over 100 centers and thousands of disciples to take care of and manage. It was a new post. In those days, there was no, you guys, you can't imagine this. There was no email. There were no cell phones. To make a trunk call overseas took all day. So there was no communications. The only communication instrument was the mail. So Srila Prabhupada managed his entire worldwide movement by letter. So he would get 10, 20 letters a day, and he would dictate them to me in the early mornings. I would spend all day typing them on a little manual typewriter, getting them to the post office. That was my biggest job. But I also had to make, Prabhupada was traveling, I had to make all of his travel arrangements and look out for his daily activities. And above all, I came to understand that the secretary's most important duty is to record everything that Prabhupada said. They had just invented this tape recorder. The first ones were 3 feet cubed, practically. They were so big, reel-to-reel tape recorders. So to lug one of those things around the world and find tapes for it was a big job. But I saw it was so important to record everything Prabhupada said. Finally, they invented the cassette tape recorder, which was substantially smaller, but still quite large. And the tapes were difficult to find, the cassettes. Anyway, this became a major duty to make sure everything Prabhupada said was recorded. Yeah. And people ask me now when they read my books, how do you remember so much? How do you remember all that stuff? Every detail. And I say, well, because we recorded it. And everything, we have this wonderful thing called Bhaktivedanta Archives today in North Carolina. Every one of those tapes somehow survived, or most of them did. And they've been collected and transcribed by our wonderful devotees in North Carolina. So I just went back to those. Every letter Prabhupada wrote, he insisted that every one of his letters should have 2 carbon copies. Now, you don't even know what carbon paper is anymore, probably, but it was sheets of black paper that you put between white paper, and as you typed, it made a copy. And they called them carbon copies. And somehow or other, those carbon copies of almost every letter Prabhupada wrote survived. So you can go back through every day of Prabhupada's career and see what he was writing on that day, what he said in the temple that day, what he said on a morning walk that day, who he was talking with that day. So from those hints and clues from those documents, I was able to put together these stories. But in India and around the world, this was all going so fast, so fast. And Prabhupada's late 70s. I can't even describe to you his unrelenting energy. How does he keep up with this? Us young guys traveling with him, we could barely take it. And Prabhupada was always seemingly fresh and ready for the next adventure. He had so many balls in the air. He was a master juggler. It was the wildest and most exciting adventure of my life. First thing we did, as his secretary, he'd been trying to go to Russia for years. Now, it's hard for you to imagine now. Ramachandra mentioned Brezhnev's Iron Curtain. But at one time, the world was, in those days, divided into two camps, period. Capitalism and communism. And there was an iron curtain down through the middle of it that was impenetrable. Each side thought the other side was going to drop the atomic bomb on them any day. It was a time of great fear. The world was afraid. And Prabhupada kept saying, I want to go to Russia. Those people need this message more than anyone. So somehow or other, I got visas for us. 5-day tourist visa. We could go into Moscow. We had one letter from a professor there saying, if you do happen to come to Moscow, please come and see us. That's all that we had. We didn't even have his phone number. So we went there on the basis of this letter. Somehow or other, I got us the visas at the embassy there in Bombay. Now, we were used there 5 days. And this 5 days was the most powerful exhibition of Srila Prabhupada's mystical energy that I ever saw. In 5 days, he changed that, not only that nation, but all the Eastern Bloc nations fell to his message. It was the most amazing display of Prabhupada's mystical energy ever. The first day we got there, it was a Sunday. We were sitting in his hotel room up on about the fourth floor of the National Hotel in downtown Moscow, right beside the Red Square. And we heard all this noise outside. Prabhupada looked out the window and there was a military parade going by. Huge rockets and artillery and tanks and thousands of soldiers goose-stepping down the street. Prabhupada watched this whole thing for an hour or so. And then he turned around and looked at me and there was a tear coming out of his eye. And he said, you cannot rule a nation by fear. Within 20 years, all of this will be gone. Almost exactly 20 years later, the Iron Curtain came down. Anyway, from Russia, then we went back to the West, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, eastward again on to London, August of 71. Srila Prabhupada's second visit to his beloved Great Britain, and the first stop on his second round the world transcendental adventure. There in London, Prabhupada was challenged by some great minds. I don't know if you've heard of this Mensa Society. You know what that is? Yeah, Mensa. Yeah. It's some kind of society you have to have like a 200 IQ to be a member. Big brain society. So the secretary of that London branch of the Mensa Society came to visit Prabhupada, and they had such an interesting discussion. So the next meeting, he brought the president of the Mensa Society, and I recorded this dialogue, a debate between these Mensa members and Prabhupada. It went on for an hour or more. They would throw logical examples at him, and he would logic them back and forth, quipping. And at the end of it, Prabhupada was obviously the winner of this debate. They all bowed practically at his feet, sir. And they asked him if he could become a member of their Mensa. So the next morning, Prabhupada asked me, he said, "Did you study philosophy in college?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. That was my, and I just studied German philosophy, majored in it." He said, "Okay, from now on, each morning, from now on, you're traveling with me. You will be the Western philosopher, and I will debate you. We will start with Aristotle, or the early Greek Western philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, and go right up to the modern day." So for the next 9 months, every day, we discussed Western philosophers. I found a book of Western philosophers, a summary, and I would bone up the night before. We started with the Greeks and worked our way right up to the modern existentialists. And I would take the part of that philosopher. I would be Plato. I would be this one or that, Nietzsche or this guy or that. And Prabhupada would debate me. So all of the highlights of those philosophy discussions are also in volume 2. I try to weave them in. I don't know if you guys out there are much interested in these kind of debates with Western philosophers. I could read one, but you can see them in the book. And then from London, then we went to Africa. One night in London, after a month of being there, Prabhupada said, "Well, it's time for us to move on now. I've got invitations from Los Angeles, New York, Paris, blah, blah, blah. And I have one here from Brahmananda in Nairobi. Where do you think we should go?" So knowing Prabhupada's thirst for new things and adventure, I said, "Well, you've never been to Africa, Prabhupada." He said, "I was thinking the same thing. Make arrangements." So the next few days later, we left for Africa. I'll just read a little description of our first Sankirtan in Nairobi. Now, this was a scary thing, to be in this Black African nation dressed, 5, 6 white guys dressed up in robes, wandering around the streets, chanting something and playing instruments. I was scared to death, but Prabhupada said, "No, you must take Krishna out on the streets, wherever you go." So, but as we jaywalked across Nagong Forest Road and threaded our way through the Kibera slum towards Kamakunji Park to conduct the first public Sankirtan in Africa, even stalwart Brahmananda looked scared. Me, I was shaking like a leaf. Just yesterday, I had seen a guy in a breechcloth walking down the street with a zebra hide over his shoulder, flesh blood running down his back. This was a savage country, only recently seized back from the British by the murderous Mau Mau in the 1960s. Jomo Kenyatta had launched his successful campaign to oust the Brits from this same Kamakunji Park. And here we were, heading for the very freedom tree under which he had rallied his people to revolt. Would this work? Well, to make a long story short, we started chanting. And probably half an hour with our eyes closed. I didn't even want to see what was going to happen. And we finished the kirtan. I looked up, and there were like 200 people gathered around us, chanting and dancing with us. They loved it. And one lady said, "Have you got the book?" And Brahmananda held up his Bhagavad Gita and says, "Yes, we got the book." And they loved it. They started coming to the temple in droves after that. So this was the first time I'd seen Prabhupada in action in a savage wilderness. The dark continent. Then back to India for another 6-month-long dazzling magical display of Prabhupada's energy. Srila Prabhupada would chant his rounds somewhere around, I don't know, 3, 4 in the morning. He would chant his rounds. And then he would ring his bell for me to come and see him about 6 to take dictation. He would dictate and answer all of his letters for about an hour, and then take a morning walk, a couple of miles. We'd walk every morning, come back, have a little breakfast and massage, and then the daily activities would start. People would come. He would go places. Every afternoon there was some engagement of some kind. Every evening. And he would speak in the temple in the morning too. I forgot that part. After the morning walk, he would speak in the temple. And then in the evening, if we were in a place with a temple, he would speak there. Or a pandal program, sometimes 3-4 programs a day. And then at night, in the evenings, he would gather his devotees around him, whoever was there, and we would talk late into the night, almost every night till midnight. Then he would say, "Oh, now you guys go to bed." And he would start translating. He would translate right up until he started chanting. I never saw Srila Prabhupada sleep in all those years. He never ate much, but he never slept. There's one story that I like to read about this sleeping business with Srila Prabhupada. I don't know if you've heard this one yet. Okay. $292. Everyone all right out there? Nobody getting bored?
No, no problem.
Okay. We're on this train, and Giri Raj had arranged some programs in Madras, which you call Chennai these days, but in those days it was Madras. And Prabhupada was stationed in Bombay, so he had to go to Madras by train. It was a 2-day trip, overnight trip. Prabhupada and I had this little first-class compartment, air-conditioned compartment with 2 beds, bunk beds, and I slept on top and he slept on the bottom. So after all the day's activities were finished, Prabhupada said, "Oh, you can go up and sleep now, Shyamsundar. I'll start my translating." I extinguish all but the reading light above his tiny fold-down escritoire, then climb up, spread a chadar over my reclined body, and drowsing, watch Srila Prabhupada below. He puts on his glasses, arranges his books, presses buttons on his dictaphone, plays back yesterday's work, and starts to translate. He speaks slowly and clearly into his microphone, enunciating each word for his faraway editors as eternal wisdom flows from the ageless author in an uninterrupted, continuous stream. Rail tracks clackety-clack from a tiny rewind, ding, 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 receding a deserted crossing, and I fall into sleep. A far-off moan from the locomotive breaks my slumber. The light is out, and I scoot over to peer over the edge of my bed. down to Srila Prabhupada's bunk, expecting to see him sleeping. I've never seen him actually asleep. This may be a first. He's on his side in the starlight, legs drawn up, and just then his right eye opens and stares into mine above, with no expression on his face, as if to say, "Thought you'd catch me sleeping, huh?" So in 6 short months, late 71, early 72, Srila Prabhupada had his massive India projects underway, and you'll can read the full stories of these in volume 2. And despite the incompetence of his Western devotees, we didn't know how to do anything. And many of us were always sick, and somehow or other Prabhupada did everything. He was the commander-in-chief. He acquired these properties. He fought legal battles. He overcame obstacles of every kind. He did it all. We couldn't do anything. So then he said, okay, we can leave India now. These 3 projects are underway. And we went to Australia and Hong Kong, New Zealand, Hong Kong, a few weeks in Japan, where he negotiated with Dai Nippon Printing Company. Amazing negotiations in their skyscraper building in Tokyo. Prabhupada talking them down and squeezing them for every rupee. Then on to Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, Prabhupada became, that was his rest area. He loved to rest in Los Angeles, and the climate was perfect. And Los Angeles, being the center of the world entertainment business, was a natural place for Prabhupada. And I began to see him in Los Angeles as a movie kind of, the star and the producer and director of a movie. He was creating this Krishna consciousness movie. It went on for years. The glamour, the drama, every exciting thing you expect in a movie was always around Prabhupada. So volume 2 ends here in Los Angeles. Srila Prabhupada now has a huge worldwide society with hundreds of temples, thousands of disciples and devotees to care for and manage. And he wants to retire. Yeah, right. Retire, write books. And so he begins to initiate sannyasis to help him. So he has to demonstrate to them how it's done. So this begins his 3rd round the world journey, transcendental journey, to show his sannyasis how it's done, these new young sannyasis. And I get to go along for the ride. So this will be volume 3, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, and it starts in Mexico. And then volume 3, which I don't have, is not printed yet. It's in files, hundreds of files around me. From Mexico, we traveled to Portland, Oregon, and then Los Angeles again, and San Diego, and then New York, and then back to London, and Paris, Amsterdam, Edinburgh, Glasgow, then over to New Vrindavan, Dallas Gurukul, then back to India. And this trip to India, Prabhupada, not only Hyderabad and Ahmedabad, but he conducts the month-long Nectar of Devotion lectures in Vrindavan, a month. He speaks from Nectar of Devotion. This is a fabulous story in this 3rd volume. And he fights this months-long battle, legal battle in Bombay against Mr. Nair over the Juhu property. That's very interesting. Prabhupada in lawyer mode. No one could out-lawyer Prabhupada. and then Calcutta, and then Zurich, Switzerland, on, back to London. The highlight of Volume 3 will be the 3 months, the summer of 1973, that Prabhupada spends at Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, outside London. Bhaktivedanta Manor was the 17-acre country ashram that George Harrison donated to Prabhupada. And during this summer, this 3-month interlude at Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada is the most relaxed he's been since I have met him. He's at his most powerful. There are no outside engagements, so we start bringing every day to him intelligent people, interesting people, powerful people, the best minds we could find. We started bringing every day to meet Prabhupada and converse. And this was Prabhupada's favorite pastime. His favorite occupation was conversing with interesting people. We recorded all of these conversations. More than 50 conversations were recorded that summer. And I've taken the highlights of those conversations and put them into Volume 3. You'll love these. I'll just read one example from which will be in the coming Volume 3. This is a conversation with George Harrison, the famous rock star. They met and conversed many times over the years, but this was a particularly juicy conversation they had, because it was after Prabhupada had, George started the conversation asking him about, saying, I'm so addicted to chanting now, and it helps me so much. I get lost in it. I'm breaking off all of my relations with other people. I can't endure anymore what other people do. I just want to chant. And Prabhupada answers all those questions for him and steers him through that. And then George is a little bit also worried about the future of Krishna consciousness. I'll just read from Volume 3, this conversation. One more thing bothers George. What will happen to the Krishna consciousness movement in the future? Implying what will happen to the devotees and himself when Prabhupada leaves his body. Prabhupada returns to the room, sits down, and George sort of shifts sideways, a stern look on his face as he addresses all of us. At the moment you see, you have Prabhupada there, who everyone, he's like the figurehead and the spearhead and the one who everyone can draw their energy from. But sooner or later, everyone's going to have to go out there on their own, doing, carrying out what everybody's learned. And at that time, and then Prabhupada interrupts him, and this is Prabhupada speaking now. If my disciples remain strictly to the spiritual principles, they'll get strength. This is the Vedic injunction that one should have full faith in Krishna and the spiritual master. Then everything will be revealed. That is revelation. Nobody can understand spiritual life by academic study. The more we become sincere and stick to the spiritual principles, it will be revealed. Just like the sun, now it is darkness. By your scientific method, you cannot get the sun to rise now. The sun will rise automatically in due course. Similarly, spiritual method is we have to work for the mercy of Krishna for the sun to rise. Therefore, this devotional service. Krishna is pleased by service. Krishna is not in want of money or anything. He is complete. But he becomes very much pleased by one's service. Now, what is that service? Yaidam Paramaguya. For one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me. There is no servant in the world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. explaining the supreme secret. This is the highest service. By preaching this Krishna knowledge, automatically the sun appears and you go back to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada adds, sometimes it is a little difficult, this preaching service. We are promoting restrictions. We say God consciousness can be awakened proportionately as one becomes purified, because Krishna is the purest. So we begin with 4 restrictions: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. Right away, they will say, please go away, don't preach. So animosity will be there. Never mind. You go on preaching. Eka Chandras Tama Hara Kunti. If there is one moon, that is sufficient. There is no need for millions of stars. One person enlightened is sufficient to give light. There is no need for many glowworms. Glowworms can be important only in darkness, but when there is sunshine, they have no value. So my request to all devotees, you just go on chanting, distribute Krishna to everyone, become yourself purified, and Krishna will reveal himself like the sun, and everything will be all right. This is an actual conversation that Srila Prabhupada had with George Harrison. So in these 3 volumes of, are we still, can I see you? Yeah, I think we're all right. Can you see me? All right. In these 3 volumes of the Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, let me bring this, maybe some more light over here. I've added a lot of photos. In the first volume, there's 120 photos. In the volume 2 is 170 photos. And in this volume 3, we'll have 230 photos. One picture says 1,000 words, right? You follow the stories in these books with photos. And what's really cool is that as time progresses, from the early black and whites, I mean, no devotees had cameras in those days. Cameras were not easily available. They were very expensive and clumsy. So there are not many photos from the early days, and those that are there are mostly black and white. But as we progress now into the 70s, more and more color photos come. This 3rd volume will be almost 200 color photos. I'll show you this. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see it? This is just some of the layout pages. "48 pages of color photos, 230 shots. So in every respect, this volume 3, upcoming volume 3, will be the crown jewel of this trilogy, Chasing Rhinos. And so far on this 8-year effort to produce these volumes, it's a total of 1,500 pages and now nearly 500 photographs in all. It's been a great labor of love. But I'm doing this project as I imagine Srila Prabhupada would do it, doing everything myself, following Srila Prabhupada's example in a way. The first Srimad Bhagavatams he brought to us in Haight-Ashbury, he had printed in India. He did everything in those, producing those books himself. He even used to lug the paper across Delhi to the printer after buying it. He designed that incredible cover. If you've ever seen that cover of Srimad Bhagavatam, the first Srimad Bhagavatams, he designed that psychedelic cover himself, far ahead of his time. He did all of that stuff himself, and that's kind of been my modus operandi on these things too. That's why it's taking so long. I do all the writing. I have editors, but I do all the photo selection and the photo enhancement. I have to pay professionals to do all that stuff. So these are the best quality books. I'm trying to make everything perfect in them. Each photo is digitalized and professionally enhanced, for example. The covers, I've enlisted Bardraj and other artists and graphic designers to help produce these covers. Everything perfect, but it costs a lot of money. Somehow or other, Krishna has provided at every step. The sales from one volume has paid for the production of the next book like that. So I just want to make sure that generations from now, new devotees will see these books and be attracted to want to read them, appreciate what's in them, to grow to love Srila Prabhupada as I do. And right now, volume 3 is almost print ready, but the cost of enhancing and laying out so many color photos is more than I expected it was going to be. And I'm lacking the Lakshmi to pay for the final layout and printing. So I pray you will go online to my website and purchase as many copies of volume 1 and 2 as you can. But the website is called Chasing Rhinos, one word, chasingrhinos.com. If you can go on that website and buy as many books as you can, and I'm making a special price on bulk sales, wholesale price for 30 or 40 bucks or whatever anyone wants to give to their friends. Oh, he's got the website up there. The bulk sales, a volume, I give a special price on that, and I'm calling that sale price these prices are much more reduced now on this bulk sale price. I'm calling it my fire sale because last summer I had a cabin in the mountains in Oregon to do my writing, and it was destroyed in a forest fire. Can you believe that? I woke up one morning with a raging wall of fire coming toward me, Krishna's forest fire. I grabbed my computer and all my book research materials and I escaped. But, there was some loss there. So I'm calling this my fire sale, wholesale, bulk sale. Anyway, and also on chasingrhinos.com, there's a green donation button if anyone feels like contributing to make this book happen. Every penny will make it happen. Early next year, I'm hoping, shooting for early next year. Or you can write to me. My email address is chasingrhinos, one word, chasingrhinos@gmail.com. I'll just read one little paragraph here which sums up the whole thing. This is in volume 2, near the end of volume 2. His little bell tinkling, even in sleep, has become my wake-up call to happiness, transcending all other previous meanings of happiness. I cannot see enough of Prabhupada. The physical beauty of his face, especially his face, captures my eyes from morning till night, and I feast on his endless allure. He trusts me. He depends on me. How can I possibly deserve such mercy? He is in my care, I thought, forcing me to rise beyond all other considerations. I'm his audience. He seems to be energized by my laugh. He tries things out. He floats ideas. I'm a sounding board, his straight man. What do you think, Shyamsundar? He catches my glance from across the stage, raises an eyebrow like, how am I doing? His smile, his laugh, especially his laugh, are all that I live for. All glories to you, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. How are we doing on time now, Ramachandra?
We're doing good, Prabhuji. If we can go into some question and answers, that would be great.
Okay.
Before we do that, I'll just take a couple of minutes to make some quick announcements.
Okay.
So just bear with me 1 second so devotees know of our upcoming programs. This coming Wednesday, we have, I'll just share my screen. This coming Wednesday, Sangha, we have His Grace Gopal Haridas speaking on the topic of living a life of bhakti. And next Sunday, we have His Holiness Bhakti Vasudev Swami Maharaj going to speak. Anybody joining for the first time today, if you have children or you know of other kids who would be interested, we have Thursday weekly story time for children as well, which has been going on since March. And the parents and kids have learned so much throughout these last few months, and they love it. And also every Friday we have a Bhakti Vriksha programs. You can click here and get more information. And daily afternoon, Prabhupada Bhagavad Gita reading, Bhagavad Gita as it is, and every morning, 6 to 8 a.m., the japa calls. So many ways to associate. And here is a beautiful picture of our deities of our center, Shri Radha Shyamsundar Ki Jai. This was a very heart-touching talk by His Grace Shyamsundar Prabhuji. Just meditating on how much opportunity, from the bottom of their heart, giving up everything they had to serve Srila Prabhupada and engage everything they had in serving Srila Prabhupada. When I read Leelamrita also, all these things, a lot of it was coming back from the Leelamrita. So I personally feel that I owe so much to all the devotees who have laid the foundation for our movement. And when times of needs like this, it is up to us. We try and step up and help the devotees who are, again, even after Srila Prabhupada leaving, are relivening their memories, those pastimes, those untold stories. So I'm going to request devotees if they would like to, as Prabhuji mentioned, his cabin was burned down in the wildfires of California. And for the third volume, as whatever help one can do, I'm going to open the chat room. And if anybody would like to donate any amount, you could just type the amount, because we know who's typing. We can take the name. Unless your name is not on your profile, then we don't know who's typing. And we will make a note of whoever is donating and get back to you on how, and we can collect the amounts and send it back. So at this point, I will start with one question that I have for you, Prabhuji, is being so dull-minded that I am, and many times I can't even remember what I did yesterday and what happened a couple of years down the road with things. It's very hard to, but you have memories. You did get a lot of material from North Carolina, but still you have a lot of memories. How do you remember all this? And the other part of this is, why do you think Srila Prabhupada selected you as his secretary and for all these important projects like the London and going to India with the 20 devotees? If you could share some.
Wow, very complex questions. But, I touched a little bit earlier on the recorded information we have from Prabhupada in our archives. That is certainly the beginning point for all my research. But Srila Prabhupada was such an outstanding personality that every moment that you spent with him made an indelible memory in your mind, deep. And if you spend time with him from early morning to late at night, year after year, of course, it's billions of memories. to sit down and put them into a chronological order, and using the recorded information from the archives as a stepping stone. I was amazed at how much internal memory comes to you. Krishna says, I am memory, right? I am memory. I am memory and forgetfulness. So if he wants these things to be remembered, of course, what is that to him? It's nothing. It's been a transcendental experience. When I was deeply writing these memories several years ago, I would sometimes, toward evening, I would look up from my computer and say, oh, it's getting dark out, and look down. I'd still be in my pajamas from the morning. Time just goes away, thinking of these times with Prabhupada. And I know that it was, my relationship with Prabhupada and this whole spiritual relationship with Krishna and so on depends a lot on mystic experience. I have to see mystic experience a lot in order to be convinced and happy in Krishna consciousness. And if you look for signs and the mystic existence around us, it's all miraculous. You can see it everywhere all the time and be encouraged by it. You know, when we don't see that, the mystic part of life around us is when we're unhappy. But going back to that idea that sometimes I would be stumped. If you read my books, you'll see that it's more or less chronological, and I would be stumped. What happened that day? I would start to remember something really important happened, but I couldn't remember. And I would take a walk that night and think about it, and go to sleep. And wake up in the morning, knowing the answer. That's what happened. Krishna would implant that. Or one time, even a physical example, had been looking for, you'll notice in the books, a lot of research stuff, quotes and information from outside sources to enliven the book. I've been looking for this one interview with George Harrison for about 3 weeks. I'd sent off Amazon all these books I was getting in the mail, trying to find a copy of this. I knew it was an important interview that George gave on a certain date in London to the BBC. There should be a record of it somewhere. Couldn't find it. All these, probably a half a dozen books came in the mail, and I read through them, and I couldn't find that on the internet or anywhere. I couldn't find that interview. And so I went to bed that one night, and about 5 o'clock in the morning, at that time I was living in Southern California, the whole room shook, and I woke up. It was an earthquake. We were in the middle of an earthquake. I heard some books and stuff fall out of the case in the living room, and I just went back to sleep. Another earthquake. Happens almost every day in LA. So I went out in the morning to breakfast, and I looked down at the books that were laying there, and one of them was opened right to that interview. It was open to the first page of that interview with George Harrison. Krishna was always playing tricks like that as this book came together. And the more I wanted it to happen, he would let it happen. Your second question. Why was I chosen to do this? God, it must be something too, in our tradition, we read things like Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we know the history of how how Krishna brings his friends along to do certain things. I hope that's why. I just know when I leave this body, if Prabhupada is not there, I'm going to be very unhappy. Wherever he is where I want to go. Any other questions?
Anyone? If you have a question, please raise your hand or type in the text box. Take the opportunity to find out from such special devotees how we can follow those footsteps, what we can learn. Questions is the entire basis of the Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes devotees tend to shy off from questions, or they feel it's a foolish question. But if you read Arjuna's questions, if you read the questions that devotees in the early 60s and 70s asked, if there could be nothing more foolish than that, if we compare that to our questions. So no questions are foolish. I just request devotees to take some advantage.
Yeah, my advice is always to measure how much fun you're having. I mean, the symptom of Krishna consciousness is the ultimate happiness, the ultimate pleasure, right? This is why we do it. And the basic symptom of happiness is laughter. How much are you laughing? How much fun are you having? This is how you measure your progress in Krishna consciousness. When Prabhupada was around, he was surrounded with laughter. Everything he did. I mean, he would be sitting up there giving some very stern lecture to a group of people, for example. And if you look at maybe 50 photos where Prabhupada is there and I'm somewhere in the background, out of 50, 48 of them, I'll be laughing. Because Prabhupada just, the cosmic play, the cosmic drama that he was part of was a comedy in every respect. Krishna consciousness is fun. And if you're not having fun doing it, then there's something you got to adjust. Our service, everything should be fun. It should bring us great pleasure and laughter.
Thank you.
I can't see very well.
Some devotees, if you join late or if you're not sure, some are asking, what is this collection for? This is for the third volume of Prabhu's, the book he's writing, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. And as he mentioned that recently in the wildfires in California, he lost his cabin. A lot of the materials, items were burned down. So we're trying to help in whatever way we can to raise some funds so he can continue with this project.
I'm trying to sell books more than anything. I'd rather do it that. I kind of go by one of the purports I recently read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of Prabhupada's purports. I've written it down here. I'll just read it to you. It kind of reflects my way of looking at all this. When a Brahmana adopts the profession of a kapota or pigeon, he lives by collecting grains from the field. This is called unshavritti. A Brahmana who takes to the unshavritti profession is called first class because he depends completely on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and does not beg from anyone. Although the profession of begging is allowed for a Brahmana or sannyasi, one does better if he can avoid such a profession and completely depend on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for maintenance. In other words, I'd rather sell the books.
There's a question in the chat box. First of all, thank you for the wonderful heart-moving class.
Well, thank you. You must know I never do this. I avoid these kind of Zoom meetings. I haven't done very many, but you appeal to me in a special way, Ramachandra. And I know that I've never met probably all over there. But I appreciate what you're doing so much in your daily lives there on the East Coast in New Jersey. And I feel that you need all the encouragement you can to keep pushing this movement forward over there. So my time is yours.
I just, when I saw the email from Kuladri Prabhuji about what had happened, I felt moved to try and do something, and at least, if nothing at all, have your voice be heard in our community. That's the least I can do as one of the leaders in our community. The rest is up to the team for our. So the question is, how can we second generation devotees can be connected with Srila Prabhupada like how you are?
Well, I think Prabhupada answered that earlier in that conversation that I read, where he said that Krishna will reveal to you everything if you follow the principles. So it's not like Krishna is only accessible from the outside with things that you do. Krishna reveals Prabhupada reveals his love for you from the inside as you follow and as you chant. We have this wonderful magic formula called the Maha Mantra. It works every time. You don't need to, whenever there's a moment of doubt or depression or hopelessness, you just start chanting and it works every time. It's a magic formula. It's a shortcut to Srila Prabhupada. It's not like I'm connected with Prabhupada, you're not, because you were born 50 years later. It's not like that at all. Krishna is eternal. Prabhupada's eternal. The Spirit is eternal. We're just passing through it. My career, my active career for 50 years was as a mining engineer. So I've studied geology a lot. And I know that, for example, rocks that I'm sitting on here in California, the ones that I'm sitting right below me, these rocks, originated somewhere down around New Zealand and have drifted up this far north at the rate of 1/8 of an inch a year. So how tiny my life is, how tiny my existence, even in comparison with this little planet we live on in terms of time and significance. So you're all eternal. Prabhupada's eternal. Your relationship with Prabhupada is eternal and it's personal. It's yours. You just open it by this chanting of Krishna's name and he reveals. You have mystic experience. Your life should be one mystic experience after another. It's not me or it's not my property or anyone other devotee's business.
Okay. There's Ramsharan Prabhu has a question. Ramsharan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hare Krishna is Dandat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my obeisances. All goes to Prabhupada. Prabhuji,
Nice
today I'm feeling like some celebrated like a sports star or some movie star is presented. We are so fortunate with your presence in our assembly of devotees. Thank you very much.
Well, Prabhupada always said that real fame is Vaishnava fame. If only Vaishnavas are famous to each other. So I feel like in your presence, I'm in the presence of celebrity also. Your glowing young face in New Jersey.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
So, Prabhuji, actually, I had one question I prepared to ask, but that you already answered. So then I thought we'll ask another question, Prabhuji. So the question I had is, generally we say familiarity breeds contempt, right? So
Say again. Say again.
familiarity breeds contempt. As
Generally,
you get
generally what?
the familiarity,
Familiarity
yeah, breeds contempt, right?
breeds
That's the
contempt.
yeah, that's a
Right. Gotcha.
general saying. So here you are so fortunate that you got a personal association with Srila Prabhupada. So I would like to understand how you manage that. Uh, I heard the stories that there were some devotees, they got so much personally um, as a contact with Srila Prabhupada, and they end up fell down and this and that. But how you manage that relationship, make best use of your association, so that I mean, as people like me also sometimes while dealing with the devotees, we develop that tendency, that familiarity. So could you please throw a light on that thing? How
That's an
you
important point that you brought up there, that familiarity breeds contempt. Prabhupada used to quote that a lot. He would always say familiarity breeds contempt. And I had to be aware of that concept constantly around Prabhupada, to never take him for granted. I served him day and night. I was in his attention, a focus of his attention constantly. And of course, the temptation quite often, we're only human, is to take advantage of that relationship. So I constantly had to fight against familiarity breeds contempt with Srila Prabhupada. So I made it a point often to leave his company. Like, Prabhupada, I need to go to the beach for a day today. Can I go this afternoon to the beach? Yes, go ahead. And then after traveling away for a little bit, I'd come back, and it was just like seeing him for the first time again, and everything would be fresh. So it's a good point. You have to, with the interpersonal relationships, back off, and not, I saw that happen too. I mean, even with myself, I'm sure I committed many offenses due to my familiarity, but it's good to be aware of that and try to avoid it by just creating a little distance once in a while with the other person. All right, you guys.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
I pray that you enjoyed this as much as I have. It's really been great. Thank you so much.
There are more questions coming. Would you like to, you have some time?
Okay, but not much more. I'm very tired tonight.
Yeah. Just maybe this last question.
One more?
Just one last.
Okay. What is
Go
it?
ahead.
Rukmavati?
No, it's Jai Draupadi. Go ahead.
Jai Draupadi?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for accepting Ramchandra Prabhuji's request. We are so fortunate today you are here, and we heard about Srila Prabhupada. Please bless us so we also can continue the mood to serve Guru Maharaj and all the Vaishnavas.
I have nothing to give you, but you're giving me your blessing by seeing you.
Thank you.
All right.
Prabhuji, we will, I'll just announce we raised about 2,000, to be exact amount, $2,127 and
What?
one box, one full box. I'm not sure if it's one box of each volume. Is it, Gopal Gauri Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, Gopal Govind is ordering one box of each book.
Oh, can you email me those details?
Yes, I will compile.
Mailing address and all that? Yeah, okay.
I'll compile all that. And there are a couple of more questions which I can also maybe send it to you offline. And whenever you have time, you can.
Well, if briefly, go ahead. I'm still here.
Okay. I'll come after you.
What is that?
Hare
Gopal
Krishna
Govind?
Prabhuji, my humble. Hare Krishna Prabhuji,
Yeah.
this is Alka. My humble obeisances
Oh, Hare
and
Krishna.
all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, I could sense very strongly that you miss Srila Prabhupada. I'm sure you do, because I'm sensing that in your talk, especially when you said that you would like to be in a place where he is and you would be very disappointed. That really touched my heart. So when you, I don't even know how to ask this question. Do you feel his presence?
Oh, yeah.
As you work through your books?
Yes, of course. It's like I can turn around and he's standing right there advising me, don't say it this way, say it that way. And I especially feel Prabhupada's present when I do something risky. Because Prabhupada, to understand Prabhupada, you need to see him as the soul of a great adventurer. He loved to do something different all the time that was risky. And he loved to do that. And so when I do something like, okay, I got to get in my car and I've got to drive to town, it's a risky endeavor just to get to the place you're going in this day and age. I always feel that Prabhupada's there and taking in all the excitement of a new adventure. That's everyone's probably got a different way of relating with Srila Prabhupada, but this is my way. I mean, I feel Prabhupada around me most when I'm doing something kind of adventurous. I can feel him enjoying the excitement of it too, because he never stopped doing the wildest things you could imagine. Whatever you suggested, let's do this next. Okay, let's do it. Off he would go like a child with a new adventure. So, and he was always saying, I started off this whole talk about that way, that taking risk for Krishna, you get to see Krishna faster. Because that's the spirit Prabhupada imbued in us from the early days, that you want Krishna, it's not so easy. You got to do something to attract his attention. And if you're doing it for devotional service, he has to step in and protect you. He has to help you. Go right to the edge of your possibilities. And there you'll find Krishna help pulling you along.
Thank you very much. That was the icing on the cake. Prabhuji, that was the icing on the cake, because it's so important to carry forward this movement of Srila Prabhupada.
Yes.
That we continue having risk takers in our movement. If we are all in the comfort zone, it's not going to be happening soon.
I know what you mean. It's yeah. But, everything is time, place, and circumstance. That was always Prabhupada's. You can't compare anything over time. It's everything is always different. The circumstances are different. So anything Prabhupada said or did was according to time, place, and circumstance. It's important these books give you an idea of what the time, the place, and the circumstance was when Prabhupada did or said a certain thing. But times are always changing, and you have different challenges now and different ways of risking and carrying on lifestyles and calculating what is your comfort zone and what's outside your comfort zone. All these things are very difficult and different now. Mm-hmm. But Prabhupada gives us all the tools to deal with all of that stuff. I'm very optimistic about the future of Krishna consciousness. I mean, people constantly complain about how this has fallen down, that's fallen down, how it's more difficult now, how things changed. It's just a normal growing cycle of anything that grows in the material world also, that you have a young seedling and it sprouts fairly fast and shoots up full of vigor and energy, and then it slows down and it matures and gets thicker, and branches come out. And that's what's happened to the Krishna movement. It's becoming a strong oak tree. Now, you can't stop Krishna consciousness. It's big and it's enduring, and it just goes on, and it lives through all these catastrophes and downfalls and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because the truth is at our root. Prabhupada has left us the absolute truth in his books, in his pronouncements. And as long as we read those and understand that truth, nothing can go wrong. I also mentioned in this one conversation with George about how Prabhupada says that it only takes one moon. He doesn't want thousands of stars. What good are thousands of stars if you go out in the dark night? One moon comes up and the whole landscape is illuminated. And I feel that's the cycle of Krishna consciousness is going to happen like that. Moons will come along. I see all of you guys as moons in this dark landscape. You're like illuminating everyone around you. I'm very optimistic about that.
I can't speak for everybody else, but at least I can tell you that all the first round, I see this as a relay race, where the first round was all the disciples of Prabhupada passing on the baton to the next who has to run, the second generation, and then the third.
Yeah.
But at least I will try to run as fast as possible and as much as I can to take this forward. So, and pass it on to the next generation so they can take it faster and make it bigger.
Because it's pure, it's real. It can never be stopped now. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's perfect.
Let's thank Prabhuji, all of us, unmute.
I hope we meet again.
Yes.